Every Sunday morning for 30 years, a man named James Whitfield in Birmingham, Alabama, made 2 cups of coffee. He made his black. He made hers, Sandra's, with 2 sugars and oat milk, because she had switched from regular milk in 2009, and he had never once forgotten. He made both cups before he made any other decision about the day. It was not a ritual he thought about. It was just what mornings were. He did it the Sunday after she left, too. He stood at the counter and made both cups, and then he stood there for a long time looking at the second one, and then he poured it down the drain. He stood at the sink until the coffee finished going down. That was the morning he understood that 30 years of a life could disappear before the second cup cooled. And every Sunday morning for those same 30 years, somewhere in Atlanta, Georgia, a woman named Sandra Whitfield had been sitting at her sister's kitchen table talking about the marriage the way you talk about something you have already decided to leave, the way a person counts down from the inside. Neither knew the other was on the same episode of Family Feud. The call that ended James Whitfield's marriage came on a Thursday in March 2022. He was at the kitchen table when Sandra walked in and sat across from him and told him, with a kind of terrible calm that he understood had been rehearsed, that she wanted a divorce. She said she had a lawyer. She said the paperwork was already filed. She said she had been unhappy for 7 years and had spent the last 2 of them deciding. He asked her if there was someone else. She said no. He later came to believe that was true. She did not leave for someone. She left from something, from the specific texture of a life that had grown small around her in ways that James had not noticed because he was inside it. He did not fight the divorce. That was the thing people did not understand about James when they heard the story. He did not argue. He did not lawyer up with someone aggressive. He signed what was asked of him and vacated the house in 60 days and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Hoover and called his daughter every evening and told her he was fine. He was not fine. But he was not the kind of man who knew how to say that. And so he said fine, and he made his 1 cup of coffee every Sunday morning, and he went to his job at the county infrastructure office, and he came home, and he watched the news, and he went to bed, and he did it again. What he had lost was not just Sandra. The house was gone. It had been in her name after a refinancing in 2018, and she kept it in the settlement. The joint savings were split, but his half was $41,000, which after moving costs and the security deposit and the first furniture he had bought alone in 30 years, came to $18,000 in a checking account that was all he had. His pension was intact, but his retirement plan had been built around 2 incomes. He was 61 years old. He was not starting over. He was something worse. He was continuing, in a smaller version of a life that had been built for 2. Is Daddy going to die? His 9-year-old granddaughter Lily asked her mother 3 months after the divorce was finalized, because she had heard her mother say that Grandpa James was not doing well. And Lily had the kind of literal mind that goes directly to the most serious interpretation of every sentence. His daughter had said, crying, "No, baby, Grandpa's not going to die. He's just sad." And Lily had said, "Then why doesn't someone go sit with him? Sometimes when I'm sad, I just need someone to sit with me." His daughter told him that story the day before the Family Feud taping. He had not said anything. He had just nodded. But he had thought about Lily every minute he was in that studio. James had applied to Family Feud 8 months after the divorce, at his daughter's suggestion. She had filled out the application and shown it to him and asked him to just try it. Just do something. Just get out of the apartment and go somewhere with people who loved him. He had agreed because it was easier to agree than to explain why nothing sounded like anything he wanted to do. His team was his daughter Renee, his son-in-law Marcus, his friend from work Gerald, and Gerald's wife Pat. They were loud and cheerful and carried him into that studio on their noise. He sat in the contestant's chair with the posture of a man who had taught himself to look present when he was somewhere else, entirely. Steve Harvey got to James during the introduction and asked him the standard opener. "Where are you from? What do you do? Tell me something about your family." James said Birmingham. He said county infrastructure. He said, "My family got smaller this year, but the ones here are the best ones." Steve paused. The audience thought that was the emotional peak. They were wrong. "Smaller how?" Steve asked. James looked at his daughter Renee. She gave him a nod that said, "You can." And James Whitfield, who had not told the full story to anyone except his pastor and his daughter, told Steve Harvey on live television that after 30 years of marriage, he had come home to a woman who had already decided, and that he had let her go because he believed. He said it this way, plainly, because he believed that if she needed to leave that badly, she had probably needed to leave for a long time. And holding someone who needs to go is not love. It is fear wearing love's clothes. The studio fell completely silent. 300 people. Steve Harvey stood still for a long moment. Then he said, "Say that again." James said it again. Holding someone who needs to go is not love. It's fear wearing love's clothes. Steve turned to the audience. "Did you hear what this man just said?" He turned back to James. His voice was lower now, operating in a different frequency. "Brother, how long have you been carrying that?" "Since March of last year," James said. "And you've been sitting in that apartment making 1 cup of coffee on Sundays." James looked at him. He had not told anyone about the coffee. He did not know how Steve knew. But Steve had spent 40 years in a room with human beings, and he had simply seen it, the way certain grief lives in routine, in the small doubled habits that become single without announcement. James said, "Yes." Steve Harvey walked to the edge of the stage, sat down on the steps, and set the microphone in his lap. "Let me tell you about a man I used to know," he said. "An old man at a gas station told me something when I had nothing. He said, 'Son, God's got a plan bigger than your pain.' I didn't believe him. I was living in my car. I was eating whatever I could find. I held on to those words because I had nothing else to hold on to. And I'm standing here today because that man said something at a gas station that I did not deserve to hear." He looked at James. "You don't know yet what's on the other side of this. But I am telling you, brother, because 30 years ago I was you. I was a man sitting in something small wondering if this was the rest of his life. I am telling you that what you just said to this room is not the end of your story. That is the beginning." "Stop everything," Steve said. He stood up. "Cut the game. We are done with the game." The producer was already moving. Steve was already at the center of the stage. "This has never happened in the 45-year history of this show," he said into the microphone, to the room, and to every camera. "And I am going to do something right now that has nothing to do with the network." He pulled out his phone. He called a grief and life transition counselor he had worked with through his foundation, live, on speaker, the whole studio listening. He explained James's situation in 6 sentences. The counselor said she had availability. Steve said, "We're paying for it. Whatever he needs, for however long he needs it." He then made a second call to a financial planning specialist and arranged a complimentary 18-month financial rebuilding consultation specifically designed for people navigating post-divorce restructuring in their 60s. But Steve wasn't done. He held up his hand. The audience leaned in. He turned to the competing family, the Rivera family from San Antonio, and explained what was happening. The Rivera patriarch, a man named Ernesto, was already standing. His wife was standing. They crossed the stage without waiting for a question. Both families received the $25,000 prize. Ernesto shook James's hand and said, "My wife and I, 32 years. I don't take a single morning for granted, not one." James nodded. He did not trust his voice. Steve Harvey looked at James one last time and said quietly into the microphone, 30 years, still standing. He said it the way a benediction is said, not as a consolation, but as a statement of fact. When the episode aired 7 weeks later, the clip of James describing fear wearing love's clothes ran on morning shows, parenting podcasts, divorce support forums, and marriage counseling blogs within 48 hours. It reached 195 million views in 2 weeks. The hashtag fear wearing love's clothes was used 4.2 million times. Therapists cited it in session. Wedding officiants quoted it in ceremonies, not as a warning, but as a reminder. 3 months after the taping, James Whitfield began weekly sessions with the counselor Steve had called. He told his daughter afterward that it was the first time in a year that he had said out loud what the apartment actually felt like in the mornings. 6 months after the taping, James started a Sunday morning group at his church, an informal breakfast, no agenda, for men who had experienced significant life loss and didn't know how to talk about it. He called it the Second Cup. 12 men showed up the first week. By the third month, there were 31. A year later, the Second Cup model had been adopted by 8 churches across Birmingham and was being replicated in Atlanta, Memphis, and Houston. The Second Cup initiative, supported by Steve Harvey's foundation, provides startup resources for community grief and life transition groups, specifically serving men over 50. In its first year, it reached more than 1,200 men. Today, James Whitfield makes 1 cup of coffee on Sunday mornings. He says he has stopped needing to think about the second one. He says the first cup tastes better than it used to. He says that is enough. Steve Harvey said in a follow-up interview, "James Whitfield said something in that studio that I have been saying in different words my entire career. He said it better than I ever have. Fear wearing love's clothes. I think about that every day." Lily, his granddaughter, is 10 now. She still believes the solution to most sadness is for someone to come sit with you. Her grandfather has started to believe she is right. The echo lives in the small things, the cup that gets made, the one that doesn't, and the Sunday mornings on the other side of loss when you finally understand the difference between what you're holding on to and what you're holding on for. If this incredible story of loss, dignity, and faith moved your heart, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. Share this with someone who is navigating the quiet grief of a life that changed without warning. Have you ever watched someone lose everything and rebuild from the inside out? Share your story in the comments, because as James proved, sometimes the most important thing you lose is the thing that was keeping you from finding out who you actually are.